Hello friends, welcome to all of you in this session. I am thankful to the organizers of Global Online Conference for inviting and giving me the opportunity to share our community model of protecting children from trafficking and learn from others. Dear friends, my presentation will be moving along the outline that will help us to understand context of child slavery, community model to resist it, and thus leading to self-sustaining independence. Coming to the context of child slavery, in northern India, boys and girls are affected across many forms of slavery, and trafficking is also a form of slavery. Children are part of the enslaved families in debt bondage slavery. This is a system in which the slaveholder controls labors through loans with compounding debt and falsified records, making final payment impossible. These children are compelled to work in the industries like bricking, carpet, and farming, etc. Individually, young boys and girls are enslaved as domestic servants and are forced into prostitution. Among all forms of slavery, sexual violence against children is very common. Coming to the next slide, community members as liberators and agents of change. Many anti-trafficking programs tend to see children and communities as beneficiaries of awareness raising. Children have been seen as targets for prevention and as potential victims, but what we have found is that our most effective work happens when we work with these residents as potentially capable allies against trafficking. As we have witnessed the importance of what local residents can do, we now see the families in highly trafficking prone areas as the key source of identifying victims of child trafficking and giving them the courage to claim their freedom. They are the source of awareness in their communities. They are the pressure group for local government and police to act against traffickers and to help returned survivors gradually rebuild their lives. In a slide, you can see a man with a tricycle who was in slavery. His children were trafficked and enslaved in Brooklyn to unknown location. With the help of other freed communities, he released them and also helped the other enslaved families and children as well to come out of slavery. Similarly, Urmila in Pink Sari has been actively involved in organizing community against child trafficking and slavery, who is also a former slave from agriculture and has undergone physical atrocities. Our experience in northern India, in many but not all contexts, is that with the right information supports and assistance for future livelihoods, many of those in slavery can take their own decisions to collectively challenge slavery to walk away. It does require a different and more modest outlook, where we recognize that these community members, rather than ourselves, are the ones who understand the root causes of slavery and trafficking. Now coming to point how we help communities. The most important step is to build connection with the community to organize and prevent themselves from trafficking and slavery. This we do through our regular village level meetings, conducting exposure visits of the vulnerable communities, and also arranging BBC radio program against child trafficking and bonded labor. During this process, in the second step, once they understand trafficking and slavery are illegal, they become our allies and get organized into community vigilance committees. A community vigilance committee is a group of people working together to prevent human trafficking and slavery in their village and sometimes the surrounding region. Knowing that they must work together and united by understanding their legal and human rights, CVC members collectively act to reduce vulnerability to enslavement. Requiring accountability from those in power is one key CVC characteristic. CVCs demand rights and entitlements defined by law, such as health and education services, police protection, right to land, and economic development. Through the CVC, poor and marginalized residents also gradually learn to resist the control of slaveholders. At present, we are working in more than 527 communities, reaching to more than 10,000 vulnerable victims and survivors' families across 14 districts in northern India. Since January, across 14 districts, 371 children were rescued at the initiatives of the communities as well as 166 adults in last few months. We are also having a network of 14 trained lawyers who are currently handling 208 legal cases for slavery survivors. Moving to another slide, step 3. It is important to help communities identify the issues that are keeping them vulnerable. During the process, these communities get enough empowered to access their entitlement services and provisions that reduces their vulnerability. For example, in India there is a provision of free education, better healthcare services to the families, public distribution system for ration to the families at the subsidized rates, and also they have right to employment. These help in reducing vulnerability and prevent themselves from debt bondage, slavery, and trafficking by getting organized, and help them to learn functioning as a group and escalate pressure on those with power. In support of the other previous slides, I would like to share success story of CVC, comprised of survivors rescued from brick kiln in August 2012. They were in bondage for more than 7 years. MSCMVS rescued them with the help of law enforcement agencies. Once they were rescued and understood about factors responsible for their vulnerability, they got organized to demand for their rights and entitlements like free education to their children, job cards, ration cards, houses for themselves, and road in the village. They also got involved in identifying the families and children in slavery in other regions as well. And hence now we can understand when our job gets done. Even more importantly, the process is sustainable and viral, and we have tried to define what is that it needs to change at community level to make sure that liberation is sustained. These are our main standards of awareness and achievement for a community to sustainability eradicate child trafficking and slavery. Village residents in the area of a successful CVC progressively obtain more of their government entitlements such as birth registration, access to jobs through the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, below poverty line status if qualified, then social security, disability or elderly pensions, then right to housing assistance or agricultural land leases if eligible. They get access to the health care and immunization as well. And the village itself is showing strong progress toward gaining key community needs such as schools with functional buildings, enough properly paid teachers, and equal treatment for all children, along with infrastructure developments such as road, electricity, and clean water supply. Along with it, economic stability through alternative livelihoods and income generating projects, a system for collective savings, loans on fair terms, and links to legitimate banks. Coming to another important point, how we achieve successful long term reintegration of children. Successful reintegration of children is essential to prevent them from further trafficking and slavery by asserting their right to freedom and thus achieving self-sustained independence. Key steps for successful reintegration move through stages like immediate post-rescue assistance and home verification that mainly incorporates fulfilling immediate needs of the survivors like emotional care and reassurance, then urgent medical treatments, their basic needs, shelter and sleep, family contact, physical safety, legal rights, their confidentiality, and informed consent. Second step is of long-term follow-up through home visits and community vigilance-based support for focused discussion of vital areas of information that support independent living and well-being of the survivors. Follow-up visits will check and try to ensure education, shelter, banking and savings, living in freedom, income, health, justice, friendship, and their community connections, and their knowledge of human rights and freedom from violence. The third step is the most important step that says about assessment of survivors' achievement of self-sustaining independence. Progress made on the set standards are reviewed by the field staff in the context of survivor situation, their knowledge and capacity against the criteria for self-sustained independence, and further by the program director and manager. If the survivor achieved self-sustained independence, individual will no longer be receiving regular support but will become part of wider community-based activities and will help others to achieve self-sustained independence. After completing these three steps, here we achieve self-sustaining independence. In a photograph, girl shown is Dorothy, who was rescued from forced marriage. With the initiatives of communities, she achieved self-sustained freedom and now helping other children as well to achieve it. With this, I conclude my presentation and thanks so much for your careful listening and joining this session. For any further queries, recommendations and suggestions, my dear friends, you can contact me on the given phone numbers and email ID. Thanks once again.
For as long as anyone can remember, poor landless folks in this part of Uttar Pradesh, India, have been held in debt bondage slavery.
These are the kinds of huts and houses we live in.
The roof has fallen, and I have to live like this.
Families fall into debt bondage slavery when they borrow money from a slave owner to help with emergencies like health care for sick children.
If someone gets sick, they have to walk toward their own treatment. It takes 2 or 3 hours to get there, and sometimes people die before they reach the doctor.
Entire families are then forced to work to pay off the debt. Few families ever escape the illegal debt, and often they are enslaved for generations.
It's so late, and my children are so hungry, but I don't have any money.
Women labor all day for handfuls of grain. Children work in the fields or in looms. They are not paid, and they do not go to school. They have no hope for a future better than their past.
They're so poor, and they're so used to it. They think that the fact that they're working without any money is a perfectly normal situation.
Until now. MSEMVS triggers hope and inspires slaves to free themselves. They use knowledge to create change.
Most organizations that work in this state work on a welfare-based concept. But I think that to remove slavery from our society, we have to start working with legal activism to help us demand our rights.
The first step Banuja and MSEMVS take to end slavery in a village is to open a very basic school.
And it's one of the things that parents will start to take risks about. They will withdraw those kids from slave labor in order that they can go to school. And they do it all together. And that's the slaveholders' first warning that this is changing, times are changing.
Vishnu is a good student. He attends one of MSEMVS's transitional schools. The schools help former slave children catch up to grade level so that they can attend government schools.
I feel happy now because I am able to study. I don't have to be a laborer. I can study and I can go ahead.
Not long ago, Vishnu was trapped weaving carpets. His entire family was enslaved when Vishnu was injured, and his mom, Meena, took on a debt for his care. Step 2 in MSEMVS's intervention is to organize women like Meena.
When we meet, we talk about what our children need in school and what we can do next to make a living, get good food, and a good house to live in.
These self-help groups not only help them to become economically independent, but they also make them become aware of their rights and start demanding them.
We stopped working, and that's when people finally started paying us.
The other thing that these collectives do is they try to make sure that all the benefits that are supposed to be coming to these villages through India's laws are actually coming, so that, for example, they should be getting food rations for the very poorest. And then things like healthcare. The Human Rights Defenders collectives are focusing on making sure that the health visitors are coming to the villages on a regular basis to check up, make sure immunizations are there, so that people don't fall sick and then slip back into slavery. These are the kind of protections that people really need in those early stages.
Free the Slaves has been working with MSEMVS since 2005 and witnessed the change firsthand as 11 villages moved from hopelessness and fear to self-determination and pride, from slavery to freedom.
This organization is giving them a ray of hope and a support which they could never believe they would ever get.
Each of those villages has about 30 to 40 families who've been in debt bondage for decades. And at this point, in 2008, in those villages, there's usually about two or three families that are still on their way out. Everybody else now gets paid for their work, their children are in school, the women are making their own income, and they know that if there are any violations of human rights of whatever kind, they know what to do about it. They know about India's laws. They know how to organize together.
I'm really glad that I'm going to be able to make my own house and get some good food to eat. And what really makes me happy is that my children are studying. I'm illiterate, but my children will be literate.
What we've found in many parts of the world where we're working is that when you bring people out of slavery in a sustainable way, where they gain power and gain control of their lives, that many other things happen at the same time. Not only do they experience that freedom, but people's incomes go up and the health services start to perform, the schools start to actually function, and we're calling that the freedom dividend.
But Banuja's not done. He's ready to scale up to 150 villages.
And that to us is so exciting because that's really what we want to do. We want to make sure that it's working in a small area, try that for a while, and then if it does work, we want to take it to a much bigger area because we believe you really can end slavery.
The plan is to have independent researchers document the freedom dividend. That way, Banuja and MSEMVS can trigger hope around the globe. Because if you can end slavery in this part of India, you can end it anywhere. It's a big dream, but a possible dream, just like Vishnu's. That broken hand that threw his family into slavery, well, it also triggered something else.
When my hand was broken, I decided I want to be a doctor when I grow up, because so many people have to go to faraway places when they are sick. I'll be a doctor close by, so they won't have to do that.
Finally, hope for a future that's better than his past.